How much money do you need to start a business?
Like ideally very, very little. So if you're throwing money at it in the beginning to attract customers or to sort of pay your way to some semblance of getting out there, you'll come to find that that money is wasted because as soon as it's gone, the analogy I always give is you can have a bathtub on full blast and there will be water in the tub and you're like, there's water in the tub. But the minute you turn off the faucet, it'll just drain. And it's the same thing with spending a lot of money early in a startup. If there isn't a product that people come back for again and again and again, all of your customers just leave. So you really want to make sure that there's just a drizzle. There's if you're going to spend money, it's just enough that you have a little water, and you really want to be fidgeting with the plug, with the seal, and making sure that people really like it and are sticking around. And if you have repeat customers, if you have retention, if you have actual um, profound interest in your product market fit, then and only then would I spend any sort of meaningful money on customer acquisition and getting people in the door. Another thought on that I'd have is like, as best you can, try to get people that really believe in the idea with you and want equity and want to do the journey with you. And a big mistake I made early on is sort of I was insecure about how young my idea was, and I knew I needed people, a developer, because I'm not technical or other people. And I just paid them market rate, in some cases a little bit above, because I was so insecure about them taking a risk on this crazy idea I had. And then what you have is a lot of people around the table that are there for the competitive or better than competitive salary, and they don't really believe in the idea. So hard as it may be, try to find those people who believe in the idea enough and are excited enough about the startup journey that they'll join you for cheap or free and for a large equity stake so that you don't have to spend a lot of money.
On this idea of spending money, if I have money saved, what's the best way to start spending it?
Again, I think I'd invest solely in the product proper and the iteration of the product. So again, to use the cold brew example, like get the cold brew really good, get the base product. Like, I'm working with a brand very heavily right now, and they do very little marketing. And yet when you look at their numbers on their ecom site of retention and repeat customers, it's very healthy. And the only reason that happens is because the product is so damn good, it sells itself. People finish their cans and they come back for more. And it's not because they got a marketing email or a retargeting Facebook ad. It's because they really love the product. So I think getting the product right and starting at the base of the funnel, starting at just are you solving a problem? Do people really love this? And spending your money there. Definitely don't spend it on just trying to get 40,000 people to your website thinking somehow that's going to solve all your problems.
To hold this beat for a second, is there a certain threshold or number that you would advise people start with regards to money?
I think you have to be prepared to sort of take losses and make mistakes and give yourself room to iterate. I remember I was a photographer for a newspaper in Hong Kong, and I had to get a working visa. So I had to leave the country and come back. And the nearest place was Macau. Macau is like a separate country. It's the Vegas of that part of the world. And I was like 20, and I remember taking $100 and buying 2 hands worth of chips for blackjack. And $100 at the time, I probably had $1,200 in my bank account. It was a lot of money for me. And the first hand push, meaning a tie, second hand loss, third hand loss. And they just took my chips, took my money. I think you have to be prepared, like just like in blackjack, like have enough chips where you can play 26 hands, because you might lose the first four, you might win the first four, you don't know. But if you only have enough to last you through a few hands, if the first few hands are bad ones, then you're done. So if you're going to start, make sure that if you quit your job, if you have enough money, like, do you have enough money if you're conservative to last you 6 to 12 months of doing this and taking considerable losses? Um, and if not, then you probably shouldn't take the leap, because it's almost never the case that the first month or two things just take off and work miraculously. It's almost always the case that the first 3, 6, 12 months are toiling and getting that product market fit and figuring out what the hell you have to do to your cold brew to get people to drink it and swallow and come back.
Our next question, should I take on investors before I launch my idea? Will VCs invest?
I think the answer to that is broadly no. I think it's, starting with friends and family money is scary because they're your friends and family, but they invest in you. They'll see the light in your eyes in most cases for the first time because you've been working jobs that are sort of just jobs. And now you're doing the thing you love. You love coffee and you're starting a cold brew brand. Hooray, hooray. And they'll be like, cool, I've never seen Joey like this before. I know I'll put in 5 grand, 10 grand. You can do it through financial instruments that are very lightweight, like safes, they're called. They move very quickly. They're a page or two of legal documents. A priced round, which is a more mature, so serious financial vehicle, is a 20-page document and might cost you 15 grand with lawyers. It's a much bigger deal. So moving fast, closing around quickly, getting 20, 30, 50K from friends and family, 10, 20, 30K, whatever, lets you sort of iterate and find that product market fit. Now, when you have friends and family watching you so closely, it's very easy to feel that pressure and to let that make the voices in your head that you need to go and get bigger and grow and be loud, and you want to have exciting things. I got into Whole Foods. 1,000 people came to my website this month. We did 4,000 in sales this month. All of those things feel good, but those are all top of funnel things. Once again, we're not focusing on, is the product fundamentally good? No friend or family is going to want to hear that you spent 16 hours on your email nurture sequencing or on your site optimization or on the formula for the cold brew. That's less sexy than saying I got into Whole Foods or 10,000 people went to my website this month. When it comes to VCs, very early on, it's so speculative that their terms are very predatory. They'll take big stakes of your company. Um, I think it's best to wait until you have proof of concept and it's something they can really chew on and the quantum of risk is lower. It's not just some idea. You actually have traction and some proof of concept before you go and seek a larger check from an institution like a venture capitalist.
Holding very, very briefly, asking friends and family for money is typically kind of scary. How would you advise people get over that fear?
Yeah, it's really scary. I mean, it's gotten less scary for me as I've believed in the idea more and more. Like for me, when it was just an idea, it's hard to like ask for something that you only believe in 92%. Like I was very excited about this idea from day one, but 8% of me, 12, 40, maybe 50% at points was like, I don't know, this could totally blow up and fail and fuck. I don't know if I want to take. So don't take from people that can't afford it, right? Like don't go to like your sister who's a year younger than you who has $2,000 in the bank and ask her to put in 1,500 bucks. Don't put people in a position where if they lose the money, like they're going to really, really, like their life will change. So I wouldn't ever ask people for life-changing money. I would ask them for something that they're prepared to go to zero. I would make sure that they know it could go to zero. Um, Something I did far too late was bring them in. I think because I didn't want to go back, I got the money and I just wanted to kind of run like a mouse getting a crumb on the floor and running back to its hole and like never going back. I started bringing in some of the early money I got from like two dear friends, my dad, like, I got some friends and family money, and I started sort of holding like board meetings with them, maybe 2 or 3 years in, where every month I would just give them an update formally. And that sounds scary, but it was actually quite comforting because they were really in on the ups and downs and they could see what I was doing and see that I was working hard and they could feel the little bit of progress and they got really emotionally invested. And that somehow took some pressure off. So I guess my answers would be, don't ask people for money that will change their life. Ask your sister with 2 grand for 100 bucks or 20 bucks or 50 bucks, and then ask your rich uncle for 10 grand or 20 grand that if worst comes to worst, he will not be out on the street. Um, if you don't have people like that, there are like crowdfunding platforms. I've used something called Republic. I just raised 200 grand there. and you can raise from strangers that will each put in $100, $200. Um, and then the second bit of advice would be to involve the people who invested and get them emotionally excited about the progress you're making. Bring them in on the entrepreneurial journey and let them it's almost like they're taking a business school class where you're one of the cases. And maybe you can explain it to yourself that way. Like, my uncle gave me $500. He's getting a really cool lesson in entrepreneurship. That's worth $500. So even if the company fails, he'll have learned a lot and had a fun ride and something to look forward to once a month, which is hearing about all my little trials and tribulations and wins and losses. That's a gift unto itself. It adds excitement into people's lives.
Our next question is, how quickly can I sell?
So usually when founders ask me this question, I get kind of turned off. Um, or I pity them because it's so hard to be a founder that if you have even 10, 20, 50% of your attention towards the door and you're 6 months in or a year in, you've kind of already lost because it takes 100 to 150% of your energy to succeed, right? So if you're so eager for an exit, you'll probably lose. Um, That said, I think once you have some momentum, it's good to occasionally look at the horizon line and be like, where is this going? To whom might I sell? What would they want? For me, my company, I could sell to a publisher, I could sell to an ad agency, I could sell to a large corporate, and those sales are different. And so my product needs to start taking on a different candy coating. I need to sort of change a little bit about what it looks like, tastes like. The outside layer needs to mutate a little bit so that my puzzle piece fits their puzzle piece perfectly. So I think it's intelligent after a year or two to be like, what is my exit strategy? And is my company starting to grow in that direction so that it will be most interesting to the person I think will be most likely to buy? And then realistically, I mean, it depends on the industry, but if you're in CPG, the fastest exit is maybe 3 to 5 years to private equity. Um, Maybe 5 to 7 years, like 3 to 5 years if you're doing 20 million plus in sales a year. 5 years to 7 years if you're doing 40 million plus. Then you sell to Coke, Pepsi, Snapple, Dr. Pepper. Um, or you find a way to become profitable and you're doing more than 100 million in sales and you're sort of sitting above the sort of poaching ground of the Cokes and the Pepsis. So those are the three exits for, say, Rise, but it depends on the industry.
Our next question. It seems like there's a lot to do. Should I hire other people to help?
I think, again, really trying to find people, it's really hard, right? Finding a co-founder quickly is like trying to find a husband or a wife after a date or two or three. Even finding just a really good soldier, someone who's an employee that's not just an employee, but is really bought into the mission. You can't forge a marriage worth of intimacy in 2 dates, and you can't forge uh, deep belief in a company in a month of working. And so it's good to do try before you buys, where you pay people a modest amount of money for a 3-month trial and see if they fall in love and start taking the drug, start drinking the Kool-Aid. Um, it's good to set up equity structures where you're protected, where there's a cliff, which is normal, a 1-year cliff, which means they don't actually start vesting any of their equity. They can't exercise any of their stock options for a year. So if after 6 months it's not working out so hot, you part ways and you haven't given them any equity. So I think trying to find people that really believe in what you're doing so as uh, expeditiously as possible, and trying to dole out equity.
What do you look for in an employee?
I think just passion, earnestness, fortitude. You know, I've hired a lot of people that on paper are good employees. They went to good colleges or worked at prestigious other companies prior. And a lot of those people are fat, emotionally fat. They've been told they're great their whole life. They think they're great. but they don't know how to get their hands dirty, that, they don't want for something. Not to sound like a psychopath, but all of my best employees, and I've had 40 or 50 of them over my company's history, every single one of my employees now, none of them has a college degree. And I didn't do that on purpose. It's just that, like, they all want it really fucking bad. And I think the people that have done best, at least with me as a leader, and I have a very particular temperament, are people that have something to prove because their dad wasn't nice to them, or they didn't go to college, or they were rejected in some major way at another job, or they had a startup that failed. Like, they have some chip on their shoulder. And so they're willing to sort of like dig in, and they can get punched in the face a few times.
Our next question is, how should I think about giving away equity at an early stage?
A lot of founders are so precious about equity. And it's like, listen, if you don't get good people on board, your company's going to fail. And the 78% of your company that you own, because you held on to every little piece of it as hard as you could, will be worth $0. So way better to own 26% of your company when you sell for 50 million bucks than to have held on to it with your talons and not let anyone in. More than that, like, if you're the kind of founder that won't part with even a little bit of equity, it kind of means that you don't let other people's ideas in. Like, you're very self-focused and protective of your baby. And you have to realize that, like, a startup is sort of a vessel for your soul. Like, when the hub started, it was just my soul. It was just me and my whatever my energy is forming into some sort of thing in the outside world. And I, as every human, am completely flawed. I have some things that are amazing, and so the company was thriving in some respects, and some things that are awful, and the company was struggling. And I had to hire against those weaknesses to make us better at those things. And frankly, some of them are the best parts of our company today. They have nothing to do with my energy force. It's someone else. So I'd say it's very important to get people involved, and don't be so protective of your equity. Like, be okay giving away some equity. There's a formula, a mathematical formula of how much am I giving away, and do I believe the company will be worth that much more and then some because of this person's contributions. And then lastly, if you protect yourself with a 1-year cliff, 4-year vest, 1 year is a eternity for a startup. You'll know in 2 months if the person's going to pull weight. Certainly in 6. You will be nowhere near at risk of them having access to your stock options until you're really damn sure that they're a good soldier. So try them out. What do you have to lose?
Our next question is, what are your opinions on incubators and accelerators? Will they help me?
So many times when I was first starting, and even today, I had a moment of, oh my gosh, if this happens, I've won. I met with Gary Vaynerchuk very early on. It's a video online I've published a few times. He was very hard on me, very aggressive. Most people don't get past the first couple minutes because he's basically interrupting me every 5 words and yelling at me and biting his nails. But I flipped him, and by the end of the meeting, his secretary kept coming back, kept saying, "Go away." We really connected, and he said, "I'm going to help you. This is a great idea. I'm going to help you." And he kept saying that, and then he never helped me. I got into an incubator. I gave away 10% of my company. They gave me 6 months to pull out if I wanted to. And in month 5, I pulled out because they weren't providing value. Got into another incubator, 7% of the company a little bit later. Same thing, pulled out. I've had big corporate contracts that I thought were going to change the company, and they didn't. So I operate under the assumption, this is a Andreessen quote, Mark Andreessen, there are no silver bullets, only lead ones. I met with employee number 5 at Facebook, who later became employee number 2 at LinkedIn, who later became a famed investor. And he said even Facebook, he was employee 5, was stacking S curves, which means no progress, progress, no progress, no progress, progress. No, and so it ends up looking like, a zigzag going up. So what his point is like, even Facebook, the most viral, exciting company perhaps in the past 2 decades or ever, even that had repetitive periods of plateau and indecision and frustration and lack of growth until they found out the way to unlock the next tier, the next layer. So, um, my opinion on incubators and accelerators is don't assume they're going to change your life, because they're not. Some are really good and people have very positive experiences, and some are terrible. And be open to the notion that getting into one might not be the best thing for you, and try to negotiate the terms whereby you're not giving away the 6% of your company when you sign on the dotted line. Um, and I guess I'll just say, as a quick follow up to that, my personal opinion is that they do not work. I've tried two. I know 20 founders that have had horror stories. Most incubators take on too many companies. They have 26 of them. They pay attention to their three darlings. When you need them most is when you're suffering. And when you're suffering is when you're least promising to their portfolio. And so you tend to be neglected.
This isn't working. Can I sell?
No, I get calls like this sometimes, like, they either say it right out of the gate, or it becomes pretty clear 10 minutes in, that their thing isn't working, and they sort of want to just like throw it into someone else's arms, like it's someone else's problem now. And like, people don't buy, like, private equity buys distressed assets occasionally if there's a story or they really think they can fix something up and you had a track record but something went wrong. But if you're a young company, you're an unproven idea, the person that has the best chance of succeeding is you, insofar as you thought of it and you have the most passion for it. So no one else in the entire world is going to pick it up where you left off and be like, thanks for this kind of mangled idea, I'll take it from here. So no one's going to pay you for a half-baked, fledgling, and certainly not failing idea. So your option is to sort of pivot and try to adapt, try to take the feedback and alter your idea, alter, the classic example that you and I have talked about is Slack. Slack raised almost 20 million bucks. They were making a game for PCs for consumers, and they built an internal chat system to help all of their developers communicate and streamline work process. And the founder of Slack went into Marc Andreessen's office crying and said, I have 5 million left. You're one of my favorite investors. I want to give you 2 million of it. I'm going to give the rest to other investors. And Andreessen said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they talked about it and what was going well and what was going poorly. And he's like, tell me more about this chat tool. And Slack pivoted from being a business to consumer game company to a business to business chat company. And they just sold for over $20 billion to Salesforce, not 5 years later. A pivot and a failure are the same thing. Like, it's just running into a wall where it doesn't look like there's any daylight and you have failed. And failure is just being like, it's over. And a pivot is like, well, that didn't work. Here's the one little thing that's working. Let me cut everything else away and just build around that little strength and pivot. So the only difference between pivoting and failing is when the founder waves the white flag. And as someone who's gone from having 15 employees to 4 almost overnight, which I'm not proud of, but it happened, as someone who spent almost 300 grand a month at points, and after that has spent as little as 30 grand a month at points, there's always a way. There's always a way to trim, to rethink, to evolve, to execute differently. So no, if you're failing, you can't sell. If you're failing, you can give up or you can pivot. And unfortunately, as with anything in life, love being an example, only when you love yourself, only when you're not looking are people looking for you, right? Only when things are going pretty well and you've figured out how to make it healthy again, will someone want to buy you.
This is working. Should I raise? How do I know when I'm ready?
Entrepreneurs are some of the most confident, headstrong people I know, and then some of the most insecure people I know. And I always describe my company like Atlantis. Like, I work so hard on this kingdom that's effectively underwater. Like, my closest friends know it's there, but most of the world, like, no one's heard of my company. It's this huge thing that I tinker on, and I've been tinkering on for 5 years, and mostly maybe it's just started to breach the surface, but it looks this big and there's a whole city underneath. And so a lot of entrepreneurs look for moments of validation. They chase this thing that says you're on the right track, you're doing great, you're awesome. They want that article, they want that release. And so raising money and getting the TechCrunch article that you raised $2 million from this VC is your way of saying to the world, I'm not a loser. I didn't fail. I'm on a better track than even you knew or expected. But it's not a finish line. Raising money is a starting line, because when you raise money, the valuation you get is not what your company is worth today. It's what your company will be worth soon, hopefully. So if you raise at a 10 million valuation, you might be worth 4 or 5 today. You have to get to work and very quickly make it worth 10. You usually raise money for 18 months of runway. Like that goes by like that. So you can celebrate for a day or a week, but you got to get right back in the saddle and work even harder. So I invite you to think of raising money not as a finish line or as an accomplishment, but actually as more pressure, as more, you're more levered, it's more intense, they're higher expectations. And so am I ready is really a function of like, did you follow the protocol I mentioned before? If you're pumping the top of your funnel and your growth isn't sustainable, you're going to be playing this game for a long time. Outdoor Voices is a brand most people know, and they just pumped the top of their funnel. They sold a shit ton of product to people that weren't coming back. They created a very sexy brand. They had a very aspirational, hip, cool female founder named Ty. And they kept raising money and raising money and raising money. But last year they lost $40 million. And now the music's stopping. The word on the street is she's trying to raise money and can't. And so her business is going to fail. So am I ready is like, do you have an authentic product? Do people genuinely love it? Do you have product market fit? Do you have retention? Do you have good lifetime value? Do you have good business fundamentals? You know, wait until you have those things before you raise money, because money means pouring money in the top. And as per my repetitive commentary, pouring money in the top is no good if you don't have the seal in the bathtub, if you don't have the drain locked the fuck in. Otherwise, you're just going to pour, lose, and then need to raise your hand and say, I need 40 million more dollars to do it again. So are you ready has a lot to do with, do you have product market fit, and do you have a tight seal in your bathtub? Is everything really battened down? The last analogy I'll give is, I don't play golf, but if you hit a golf ball with a putter and you're off by a degree, you'll miss the hole by a foot. If you hit a golf ball with a driver and you're a degree off, you could end up in the woods versus on the fairway. And taking money from venture is like getting a driver in your hands when you've been playing with a putter. So any mistake you make, now you have $2 million at your back and people yelling at you to spend it. And you take a big swing, and if you're even a little bit off, it's going to go like a gazillion yards in the wrong direction. So spend all of your time failing when you're using a putter and try to get pretty damn accurate and good at swinging before you get the real club in your hands.